Trump's tariff war just claimed another major victory, but at Canada's expense. Stellantis announces $13 billion in investment to expand U.S. manufacturing operations, creating over 5,000 jobs across Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana facilities, marking what the company calls its largest U.S. investment push in its 100-year history. But here's the brutal reality behind this seeming triumph. As part of this announcement, they will move one model from Canada to the U.S., the Jeep Compass, which will shift from a plant in Brampton, Ontario, to Illinois. This isn't just corporate reshuffling, this is economic warfare playing out in real time, and Canadian workers are paying the price. The numbers tell the story of Trump's strategy working exactly as intended. Last year, more than 40% of the 1.2 million vehicles Stellantis sold in the U.S. were imported mainly from Mexico and Canada, which faced 25% tariffs. Stellantis estimated the tariffs could take a $1.7 billion toll on its business this year. When you're facing that kind of financial pressure, the math becomes simple. Move production to the United States or watch your profits evaporate. Stellantis chose survival, and Canadian jobs became the casualty. Canadian auto jobs are being sacrificed on the Trump altar, Unifor National President Lana Payne said in a statement, calling on Prime Minister Mark Carney's government to use Canada's leverage now to fight for our auto jobs. This isn't hyperbole. This is the reality of what happens when economic nationalism meets global supply chains. The Brampton plant, which has been shut down since early 2024 for retooling, was supposed to build the next generation of Jeep Compass vehicles. Instead, more than $600 million of the funds will be utilized to reopen the Belvidere assembly plant, to expand production of the Jeep Cherokee and Jeep Compass for the U.S. market, with an initial production launch expected in 2027. This action alone is anticipated to create around 3,300 new jobs, all of them south of the border. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't mince words about what's driving this decision. Reacting to the Stellantis announcement late Tuesday, Carney said that E-Company's decision was a direct consequence of current U.S. tariffs. This is diplomatic language for what everyone knows. Trump's trade war is working exactly as designed. Reshoring auto jobs has been a central plank of Trump's trade policy, and Stellantis just handed him a massive victory. But here's where the story gets more complex. Canada has been partially spared from his global auto sector tariffs through an existing North American trade pact. But the levies in place have created uncertainty for Canadian auto workers. Even partial protection isn't enough when you're competing against zero tariffs for domestic production. The uncertainty alone is enough to make companies recalculate their entire North American strategy. Ontario Premier Doug Ford captured the frustration perfectly, calling the announcement painful for workers, saying, "I have spoken with Stellantis to stress my disappointment with their decision to prioritize investment in the U.S., also urging Carney to stand up for the 157,000 workers in Ontario's auto sector. But what leverage does Canada really have? When Trump is offering carrot and stick, access to the massive U.S. market versus punitive tariffs, the choice becomes obvious for multinational corporations. The scale of Stellantis' commitment to the United States reveals just how dramatically the trade war is reshaping North American manufacturing. The changes will increase Stellantis' annual vehicle production in the United States by half. This isn't a minor adjustment, it's a fundamental reorientation of the company's North American operations. The maker of Jeep, Dodge, and Ram pickups said the $13 billion spend, the largest in its 100-year history, would result in U.S. production jumping by 50%, with 5 new vehicle launches and 5,000 new jobs over the next 4 years. Trump's strategy is working so well that even union leaders who typically oppose his policies are giving him credit. UAW Local 140 President Eric Graham said he gives credit to Trump's tariffs for the big investment announcement. "Without these tariffs, this probably wouldn't have happened. I acknowledge that." When your political opponents are acknowledging your success, you know your strategy is working. But the human cost is real and immediate. Thousands of Canadian automotive jobs could be impacted as Stellantis plans to move some production from Ontario to the United States. These aren't just statistics. These are families, communities, and an entire industrial ecosystem that Canada has spent decades building. Unifor, the union representing Canadian auto workers at Stellantis, said in a statement that their jobs are being sacrificed on the Trump altar and urged governments to stand up for their industry and send a strong message to any corporation taking the same egregious actions. University of Toronto industrial relations expert Rafael Gomez delivered perhaps the most sobering assessment of Canada's position. Canada needs to be prepared for a steady loss of auto assembly jobs over the coming years. Trump will not relent on tariffs designed to ensure more cars are made in the U.S. Think of the photo op, cutting a ribbon in front of the first new Jeep made in Illinois in years, Gomez added, capturing the political theater that drives much of Trump's trade policy. The timing couldn't be more significant for Trump's broader agenda. The Stellantis announcement is sure to be considered a major victory for Trump's trade and tariffs policy, and could be a harbinger of additional moves by manufacturers, foreign and domestic. Reshoring American auto jobs has been a long-standing promise from Trump, on the campaign trail in Michigan and during his 2 stints in the Oval Office. This isn't just about one company or one plant. It's proof of concept for an entire economic philosophy. Stellantis isn't alone in this shift. Stellantis' rivals have been making similar investment announcements. In June, for example, General Motors announced plans to invest $4 billion to move production from Mexico to 3 plants in the United States, including its shuttered Orion assembly plant in Metro Detroit. Ford Motor Company announced a $2 billion investment in Louisville assembly plant, which will be retooled for a new all-electric midsize pickup truck to launch in 2027. The entire industry is responding to the same economic pressures. Canada's response reveals the limited options available to smaller economies in trade wars with superpowers. Carney said his government would continue to prioritize investments that will transform our economy from being overly reliant on our largest trading partner. This sounds like strategic thinking, but it's also an admission of weakness. When your largest trading partner can unilaterally reshape your economy through tariff policy, diversification becomes less strategy than survival mechanism.
Well, it's a complicated agreement, more complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade, because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada, the people of Canada, and Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company, and they want steel and we want steel. So in other countries, they're very far away, and there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete, and so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict, nothing wrong.
The president's own words reveal how he views this economic competition. Speaking about U.S.-Canada trade relations, he explained the natural conflict between the two countries, noting that despite mutual affection, both nations compete for the same industries like automotive and steel manufacturing. He emphasized how this proximity-based competition creates unique difficulties compared to trade with distant nations. The geographic closeness that once facilitated integrated supply chains now becomes a liability when economic nationalism takes hold. Carney, who met with Trump in Washington last week to advance trade talks, has expressed optimism about the prospects for a deal to cut tariffs in certain sectors, like aluminum, but a breakthrough on autos appears less promising. This diplomatic reality check suggests that Canada understands the auto sector may be lost to Trump's reshoring agenda. The question becomes, what can Canada salvage from this economic realignment? Gomez offered one potential path forward. Canada should prioritize being an essential provider of auto parts to serve U.S. assembly plants. This represents a fundamental shift from assembly to component manufacturing, a step down the value chain, but potentially a sustainable one. If you can't compete in final assembly, become indispensable in the supply chain. Stellantis, for its part, is trying to manage the diplomatic fallout while cementing its commitment to U.S. manufacturing. Stellantis told AFP it remains committed to Canada. "We have been in Canada for over 100 years, and we are investing," the company said in a statement. But commitment without major new assembly jobs sounds increasingly hollow. Anything Stellantis has invested in Canada, any commitments they've made, have to be questioned, industry observers note. The financial pressure driving these decisions is enormous. In July, the automaker reported a net loss of 2.7 billion US dollars for the first 6 months of the year, and that it expected further financial struggles as a director, result of US tariffs. By moving production to the US, the company may be able to avoid all of the newly imposed tariffs. When survival is at stake, loyalty to historical manufacturing locations becomes a luxury companies can't afford. The broader implications extend far beyond automotive manufacturing. This Stellantis decision demonstrates how trade wars create winner-take-all dynamics that force companies to choose sides. There's no middle ground when tariffs make cross-border manufacturing economically unviable. Trump has essentially forced a binary choice: manufacture in America or pay the price. For Canadian policymakers, this represents a fundamental challenge to the post-NAFTA assumption that North American manufacturing would remain integrated across borders. Stellantis' $13 billion investment in the U.S. comes as the Canadian auto industry faces both uncertainty and financial pressure due to tariffs imposed this year by U.S. President Donald Trump, who wants to see more domestic vehicle production. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the decision a direct consequence of current U.S. tariffs and potential future U.S. trade actions. The human dimension of this economic warfare cannot be ignored. Auto jobs are being sacrificed on the Trump altar, said Unifor National President Lana Payne in a statement. These workers didn't choose this fight, but they're bearing its consequences.
Because they opened the wrong email. And it's even worse when you hear that the person who stole that car, broke into that home, or defrauded a loved one has done it many times before and just got released on bail. Canadians deserve to feel safe in their community, to know that their homes are secure, to know that their money that they've earned is safe in their own bank account. In this spring's election, we earned a mandate from Canadians to deliver change, to secure our country and protect our communities, just like this one. And we will do our part. Before I outline some details that Ruby referenced, I want to be clear. We're here in Toronto, where the Toronto Police Service secures the city. Not far from here, as do the Peel region.
The Brampton plant has been in limbo since early 2024, with workers uncertain about their futures while politicians and executives negotiate their economic destinies. Meanwhile, communities that have relied on automotive manufacturing for generations watch as their economic foundations shift beneath them. The social fabric of these communities, built around stable manufacturing jobs, faces unprecedented strain. Trump's strategy appears to be working exactly as designed. By making imports expensive through tariffs while offering young domestic manufacturers access to the world's largest consumer market, he's created irresistible incentives for reshoring. The Stellantis decision validates this approach and likely encourages other companies to follow suit. For Canada, the challenge becomes how to respond to economic coercion without escalating into full trade war. Carney said the federal government was working with the Ontario government and Unifor to protect the Brampton employees and create new opportunities for them. We have further made clear that we expect Stellantis to fulfill the undertakings they have made to the workers of Brampton, he stated. But expectations and leverage are different things. The automotive sector's transformation under Trump's trade policies represents a preview of how economic nationalism can reshape global supply chains. When the world's largest economy decides to use market access as a weapon, smaller economies face stark choices: adapt, retaliate, or find alternative markets. Canada is discovering that adaptation may mean accepting a diminished role in North American manufacturing. Stellantis' $13 billion commitment to U.S. manufacturing sends a clear message to other multinational corporations. Trump's trade policies aren't temporary disruptions, but permanent features of the economic landscape. Companies that want to access American consumers need to manufacture in America. The era of integrated North American production may be ending, replaced by America First manufacturing. The ultimate irony is that Trump's success in reshoring manufacturing jobs comes at the expense of America's closest allies and trading partners. Canada isn't China. It's a democratic ally with integrated supply chains built over decades of cooperation. Yet economic nationalism makes no distinction between adversaries and allies when jobs are at stake. For Canadian workers in Brampton and communities across Ontario's auto sector, the message is clear. They've become casualties in a trade war they didn't start and can't control. Their jobs are moving south not because of market forces or competitive advantages, but because of political decisions made in Washington. This is economic warfare disguised as trade policy, and Trump is winning.